Merci.
My name is Keith Spira. I write about music for the Times-Picayune newspaper here in New Orleans, and I've had the pleasure of interviewing Bill before and seen these guys a number of times live, and I don't know if everyone out there shares my opinion, but the show these guys did the other night on the boat was possibly the hottest I've seen that band in a long time. Do you guys agree? How did it feel for you all the other night here on the boat? How did that show feel?
Oh, it felt great. It felt great.
Yeah. Scott, you want to take some credit for, helping to revitalize this band and kick a little fire into them again?
Well, we've been working real hard, I'll tell you that.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Is that sarcastic or is
No,
that...
this is about as ambitious as rock and roll gets, what these guys have created. And I know I tried to, this was some of the first music I heard live, and some of the first music I tried to learn to play, and it was hard then and it's hard now, but it's so much fun.
Well, you had said that and it's an interesting position for you as I'm watching you sign some of these albums, some of the classic albums. These records for you were sort of, you said, the template for teaching you how to play music, essentially. Some of these classic Little Feat records.
Yeah, well, there was sort of, I was born in 1976, so the Let It Roll album was my indoctrination live, exactly. I was 13 when I saw these guys.
Wait, let that sink in for a second.
I'm going to give them a second.
Everybody's processing that the timeline real quick here.
I was trying to process how much it was spreading.
So you were, you were suckled on those albums from the 1970s.
Yes,
that was
I was suckled, yes.
Yes.
I was suckled. Sadly, you can't do that anymore.
It's true. Well, since we're on the boat here as part of the Big Easy Cruise, let's just talk a little bit about the New Orleans connection with this band, which, you guys can speak of it, I think, highly. There's always been that association going way back. I think we talked about it the other day when I interviewed Leo Nocentelli and Cyril Neville, that Lowell George played the slide guitar on Just Kiss My Baby, the Meters track from like 1976, which I had forgotten that fact, but Leo's like, man, that's not me on slide guitar, that's Lowell George. I'm like, oh, wow, okay. So what was the fascination with New Orleans going all the way back to the beginning, Bill, with the band? And that it really seemed like it came out later in those mid-'70s albums after, Kenny joined the band. But talk a little bit about what you knew of New Orleans music in the early days and how it seeped into Little Feat's music originally.
Yeah, well, we all, as kids, on radio, heard Fats Domino.
Sure.
In 4th or 5th grade, I heard the Olympics, Big Boy Pete, which is a great song. Little Richard, of course. Thank you, Fred. And when I was living in Santa Maria, I went to high school there, from Ventura up to Santa Maria. One of the guys in the band said, check this out, and it was Professor Longhair's record.
Classic New Orleans piano player, yeah.
Yeah, then we were listening to, and this is before going to L.A., Clifton Chenier and his brother Cleveland on the Washboard.
Washboard, yep.
So we had a sense of that music before I went to L.A. My parents were married in New Orleans. I was born in Texas, as most of my family were. But, that music was there. And the distinctive rhythms that accompanied that were something that I wouldn't have dreamt possible in terms of having two guys, as in Kenny Grady and Sam Clayton, that joined our band in '72 from Delaney and Bonnie, that were from that area as well. As with a lot of music, it's not a matter of whether you're from there or not. I told somebody that was going, well, what are you playing that Zydeco and that New Orleans music for? You're not from there. I said, well, I'm not from Germany, and I play Bach. I play Beethoven. I'm not from Vienna, Austria, and I play Mozart. Is that okay with you?
Good response. Well, yeah, and, to that point, John Fogerty wrote Born in the Bayou, which is a great New Orleans song, but he'd never been to Louisiana when he wrote that song. So, yeah, you don't have to be from a place to
I've never
to do
been
it.
to Mexico. No. I never went, but I should like to go. I mean, listen, I was talking to somebody else the other day about, the new moon on the river, and Susan, who's here, I said, the moon on the river doesn't shine. was in Bill's Rivers Blues. It was just, why did you write that? I said, poetic license.
Which gives you license to do just about anything. So
That's right.
You know, after Kenny got in the band, 72, and you guys did the Dixie Chicken record. Are y'all familiar with that record? Yes. Never heard of it? No, it's good. You should hear that one. It's good. That seems that's kind of when the New Orleans thing even moved even a little bit more to the forefront of what you guys are doing. And is that because of Kenny and Sam's influence, do you think? Having roots in this region?
Not directly their influence. The fact that they're in the band, okay. But as I said, we were schooled in that stuff long before they joined up, as were they with us. So it was just a natural handshake, I think, more than anything.
A natural handshake, a musical handshake.
Yes.
That was the record with the lady with the accordion on the front?
Yes.
There is a story there. I don't know if we
and
need
Tim a hunting went. No.
You probably know that story, right?
I've heard something about it. I think we may have talked about it at Jazz
Oh, there's
Fest.
nakedness in it, handcuffs, and me playing the accordion to drown out the young woman's screams, and laughter, I must say. And the cover of it looks amazingly like the lady, Linda, God rest her soul, that was with Rick Ducka. Ricky was completely clothed. It was in Los Angeles. We all lived in this little area with Richie Hayward. It was a Spanish apartments right next to the Cock and Bull restaurant. And it's summertime in Los Angeles. It's really, really hot. I get into my apartment. I hear this giggling in the back room. And I go, what's going on in here? Well, Linda had her panties down around her ankles. She had handcuffs on. And I go, Ricky, and all the windows are open. I said, you got to keep it down here, okay? We're going to get arrested. And and then in my warped mind, I said, I got an idea. And I walk into the back room, and I come back with a spatula. I said, you want to spank her with this? And that's when she starts screaming. And so I went back to the room, and I picked up an accordion. I'm like, doo, doo. I don't know how to play the accordion. I'm trying to drown her out. So I told Neon Park that story. If you look at the bracelets on her hands, the original title for Dixie Chicken, not the song, but for the album cover, was Handcuffs and Accordions. Warner's wouldn't let us do it for some reason.
I think Dixie Chicken worked out a lot better. I don't think that story was probably in the publicity material for the record, was it? That was not included in the viral. No. You're not here. I don't quite know how to follow up that story. Jeez.
We were young once.
I was going to talk about this later, Bill, but we might as well talk about it now. You're in the process of writing a memoir, correct? Memoir. So to date, right now, the sort of the big book on Little Feat is the Ben Fong Torres book, Willin', that came out a number of years ago. Let's just talk about that for a second. You guys, what's your opinion of that book? I mean, is it close? Is it accurate? Is it partly accurate? And then we'll circle back to what you're working on. Brad, what did you think of that book?
Yeah, there's a lot of the stories in there are accurate. Some of the folks in some of the families of Lowell, in particular, were offended by the fact that people told pretty much the truth of the era. I mean, the band came out of the Frank Zappa, from that group, and it was a crazy, great time in Los Angeles. But so and it was the 1970s, and as the 1970s were, I was a happily married man. Thank you, Patricia. But anyway, so most of the stories in that book are very true, and some of the people were like wishing that the reality was different. That's all. But yeah, the book was pretty darn accurate, I think.
Yeah. What'd you think of it, Bill?
Yeah, I thought it was accurate. I mean, honestly, when I talked to Ben Fong, he said he apologized almost immediately.
After the book came out, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I said, too much Lowell? And he said, yeah. We discussed it beforehand that Lowell would be in it. I mean, you can't do a book without Lowell. But he was going to write about the new band as well. I said, well, I'm sure the publishers got to you. And he said, yeah. I said, well, that's okay. So.
Right, right. Well, so, and I know this as a journalist, as I write about bands, it's different trying to tell the story secondhand than actually being in the room. So, I mean, Ben wasn't in the room when a lot of these stories happened. You were. So is your memoir going to tell, I don't know, more stories, more in depth? What are you trying to do with your book?
My story involves, it's a part memoir. It's also, I'm used to interviewing people to get a broader picture of what's going on. Because our memories, let's face it, I mean, if we remember what we did 2 weeks ago, it's pushing it sometimes. And yet we'll remember something like that happened 50 years ago, like it happened a second ago. What I struggled with for a very long time was how to write something that was at once honest and truthful, but not hurtful. I don't want to hurt Lowell George. I don't want to denigrate Lowell George. He was part of a bigger thing that was in our lives, which were drugs, which was the sexual revolution, Richard Nixon, the Vietnam War, on and on and on, the Manson murders, etc. There was a lot of things going on back then. And so if you put his name into a hat with Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, later John Belushi, Jerry Garcia, that tells a story, but it's such a minute part of the story with any of them. I would like to convey who Lowell was to me as a guy who could go over the top as I was capable of, or anybody in this band. That was part of the era we grew up in. But who was he? What was his genius as a player, as a guy that when Greg Allman and I were discussing it in a hotel room, who was that guy that attracted all these people to this band, as did most of us? I mean, Richie Hayward, as a drummer, is completely unique throughout the musical world. So it wasn't just Lowell, it was all this. But I'm not here to tell the story of Little Feat. That's a part of the fabric that I grew up in. But this is my story too, as a photographer, late in the game, age 50 or a little older, in fact. As a session guy, I did a lot of sessions with this gentleman here. Played on a lot of records. There's this canopy of things that I think would be interesting to people to see. I don't meet Lowell in this book right now until about 34,000 words in.
34,000 words into the book is when Lowell becomes, it comes into the book.
That's
so
right.
yeah, it's a bigger picture. You had a life before then and a lot of things that went into it. And
That's right.
He's part of your story, but not the whole story, obviously. Yeah. No, it'll be an interesting read. I mean, do you have a time frame for trying to finish that, or?
Tomorrow, no.
You got some time on the boat, right? You got some free time on the boat?
say, we have enough
I
time
hadn't
off
written
on
a
the boat.
thing on this boat until today. I think I came up with 50 words. I'm where I am on this book right now is at Sailing Shoes. And I was talking to Van Dyke Parks about a week ago, trying to get the time frame about when Warner's was going to drop our band. I said, was it after the first album or after Sailing Shoes? And Van Dyke goes, it was after the first album. And he and Lowell were working on Sailing Shoes. There's an album that Van Dyke had called Discover America, right? And Sailing Shoes is on that record, which I completely forgot about. So there's a lot of tidbits like that in there.
What you were telling a story the other day when we were talking about there was some track that you figured out it was Van Dyke playing piano on or playing a part on that you weren't aware of. What was that song?
It was Sailing Shoes, and in fact, Van and Lowell were working on that. So the reissue of Sailing Shoes, when Warner's gave it to me to listen to, they said, "Is that you playing the piano?" And I go, "Well, no. I mean, I wouldn't have never played it like that, but it was really good. I go, well, hang on, I bet it's Van Dyke Parks, and it was. What I didn't know is that Lowell and Van Dyke were working on that, and that was the impetus for Van Dyke to tell Warner's, hey, listen, keep this band. They're worth something on a much bigger level than the financial thing you're trying to shoehorn it into, which really, really grateful to him for doing that. I mean, he didn't have to, but he went as far as to delay the release of Discover America in order to get Warner's to listen to him. So
Wow. Okay.
hats off to Van Dyke Parks.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So, while we're talking about your book, it's a good time to maybe address any Little Feat myths that are out there that you want to set the record straight on. For instance, you didn't supposedly actually audition for the Mothers of Invention. Is that right? That you didn't, because it's, if you read the Wikipedia page and what have you, it says you auditioned for the Mothers of Invention, Frank Zappa. That's how you met Lowell. But you didn't actually do the audition, right?
No, I would have failed the audition had I done so. Frank's music was way over my head. No, by the time I did meet Frank, I ostensibly went to Los Angeles to meet Frank Zappa, and I was, you'll read the thing hopefully, and you'll see how I actually wound up meeting Lowell. But about a month after I met Lowell, Frank had gotten back from Europe, and I went up to his house. And by that time, I thought, I love Lowell George. I'm going to do a band with him. So that's what happened. But yeah, the myths are going to be. There's not a lot of them surrounding this band, honestly. I think the challenge of writing a book like this is the sediment that you have to go through to get to the story. There's just so much going on. I mean, the summer that I met Lowell, I called the summer of love, lust, and murder on the moon. It wasn't murder on the moon. It was murder, lust, whatever I'm trying to say. But in '68 was the moonshot, and I remember being in Lowell's house watching, One Small Step for Man, that whole scene. And it was just the utter chaos of that era. In fact, it was '69, that's right. So '69, and just the utter chaos. The LaBianca family was murdered less than a mile from Lowell's house. Terry Melcher, Lowell and I were in his living room talking about a record deal. He took off for Europe the next day, and the Sharon Tate and all those poor people were, Abigail Folger were murdered. So thereafter, they thought they were looking for Terry Melcher, who's Doris Day's son, by the way. That turned out to be a myth. Manson said they weren't really looking for him, but they were sending him a message.
No, it was a time where everything was pushed to the max. I mean, the good, the bad, the ugly. It seemed like it was all in all the time, and you guys, were part of that. And I guess that is, you spoke about this earlier. That's one of the challenges in writing about those years, is that you want to be truthful, but not necessarily tawdry. I guess you want to tell the truth, but you don't want to get it down and roll around in the unseemliness of some of the scenes, I guess.
I think the biggest thing I've discovered is you can allude to things. You don't always have to give the tawdry details. I mean, for those of us that were part of that era, we know what we were doing. I mean, making love, to put it politely, as opposed to the other terminology, would be, it was like shaking hands, for God's sakes. Hey, you want to, okay, like that commercial. You want to do it? Yeah, sounds cool. I mean, it was that simple. I mean, now you go, hello, and people go, what do you mean, hello?
There was no need for dinner and a movie, is what you're telling me. You could just skip right to the end point. Yeah. All right. Well, fast forwarding a little bit, Fred. When you joined the band, you'd been in that orbit. Obviously, you were friends with Lowell for many, many years and wrote with him. When the band reformed in '87, who asked you to get involved, or were you part of the impetus to start it back up?
No,
again?
Billy and I were on the road with Bob Seger doing the American Storm record in the subsequent tour, and Billy told me that they were putting the band back together after this dedication of the rehearsal hall that all of us like rehearsed in. Just everybody in Hollywood rehearsed at this place, and it was like a crazy scene again. And they decided to make a Little Feat room and asked the band after many years to get together and dedicate this room and have a little jam session. And everybody had such a great time that Billy said, hey, let's think about putting this back together. And that's when we were on the road with Bob Seger, and Billy asked me if I would be interested in joining up and getting actually on the bus with the band instead of just coming to the recording studio and laying down a guitar part here and there. And I went, yeah, man, sign me up. And that's been the beginning of this long, long trip.
Well, I say, yeah, I mean, many more years than the original band was together. I mean, you guys have been doing this now for decades longer. And wait, just to clarify, were y'all backing Bob in his band, or were you in a band that was opening for him? With Seeger, you said.
We were in Bob's band.
You were in, so was he calling it the Silver Bullet Band at that point?
Yeah, there was like 2 or 3 of them, I think. There was the piano player and the bass player and the saxophone, alto Reed was still hanging in, but the rest of us, Rick Vito was from Fleetwood Mac, was playing guitar, and I was playing guitar. Billy was playing keyboards. So we were, not really we weren't members of the band, but we were there. Yeah.
Right. You were getting
sort
paid.
of like the guys with the Stones, We were
Exactly. Right. The Stones rhythm section now, basically.
Yeah, the rhythm section, basically.
Yeah. Rhythm section for hire now. Yeah. Well, so when you got in, I mean, did it feel like starting from scratch in the sense that band, the band starting in '87, was free to create its own identity, or did you feel like, you've got to honor the legacy of what came before?
We figured we had to satisfy our own. Whether it was worth doing this or not, whether it was going to be as good as Little Feat was. We were very aware of what a wonderful band Little Feat was with the original 6 guys, with Lowell and Kenny and Sam and Billy and Kenny and Richie. But so we were very aware of what the songs that we were writing. Are they going to be up to stand next to the previous work, that we had done? So we were very aware of it. Yeah.
Did you? I mean, as the quote unquote new guy coming in, did you feel pressure? I mean, to kind of live up to some of those standards, or
absolutely. Yeah. But I had the glorious. I didn't have to replace Lowell. I got to replace Paul, who was replacing Lowell, and Paul was still alive. So Paul could say, "You're screwing up my guitar part," and I could make some mistakes. But Paul's the one that stepped up and picked up the slide guitar and started singing. He was the guy that was under the gun. For real.
Right. So yeah,
I was pretending to be Paul.
Well, and now you're the guy out in front with it too. So I mean, you've made it to the front slot, I guess.
Yeah, I've gotten to the front slot, and we have this wonderful musician here.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Well, and so Scott, I mean, coming from Greg Allman's band, you spent many years playing with Greg. Did it feel like that prepared you in a lot of ways to be a member of this band? I mean, because in a broad sense, the music kind of comes from the same place in a lot of ways, what Greg was doing and what these guys have been doing. Did you feel like you'd been prepped for your Little Feat tenure?
Well, yeah, and it comes back to what we were talking about earlier, me being a kid, the fateful summer where I saw the Allman Brothers in Little Feat. And really, my favorite bands, the reason I wanted to be in a band, it's a very different thing. You want to be, some people want to be a singer-songwriter, some people want to be a musician. When I saw these guys, and when I heard the band, and when I saw Los Lobos, which all kind of happened that summer, it really showed me that I wanted to be part of something with a group of singer-songwriters, a group of personalities. And of course, when I hooked up with Greg in 2008, and I was with him till he passed away, there was so much, to your point, that I learned from him. But what had prepared me for that was I grew up playing in clubs in the Midwest, and I'm originally from Michigan, but I started my career in Milwaukee, and I was playing with people like Buddy Miles and our local guys were, at that time, Hubert Sumlin still lived there, Pinetop Perkins. I was in a jazz program at a local high school that had this guy, Michael Cudahy, who's the guy who started the famous Milwaukee Summerfest. He underwrote our school program, and he signed a contract with everyone who played at the Pabst Theater that they had to come to our school and teach us. So I was spending 2 days with the Kenny Barron Trio and Tito Puente and Wynton Marsalis and at school.
Oh, wow.
And then I was hanging with those cats at night. So there's a whole nother lost chapter in my life, which is I moved to New York with some musicians, and we had a band, and we were being developed by Ahmet Ertegun at one time. And
At Atlantic Records, the founder of Atlantic Records.
yeah, and kind of via that whole crew there with Jason Fum, and we did a lot of touring and a lot of stuff, but we had like this 12-piece band, so it was kind of impractical, although I think we've seen that that's actually become very popular again.
Yeah. What was that band called?
The Chesterfields was the name of that band.
Chesterfields. Okay.
So we had a lot of fun, but then I was actually about to kind of like hang up my guns for touring, and then I met Greg. But really, what it all boils down to is I was trying to put together Little Feat my whole life, is what it comes down to.
A band that was like Little Feat? You mean that did what
Well,
Little
that
Feat
was
did?
based on this model that these guys really were part of this, you guys were part of this movement of bands. I'd say in the wake of the Beatles, right? It's kind of, I see it as like America's answer to the Beatles is what these bands were. And I preferred these bands personally to the Beatles. We all love the Beatles, but for me, I was born in Michigan, and these were American bands, and they told a story, and they had a way, this band, Little Feat, and the Allman Brothers, what they really share, and the band, what they really share is this incredible understanding of the combination of the songs with the feels, and they swing like every song is just, the feel is just so deep. And that brings us back to like the Big Easy Cruise, right? It's like, I think the reason this band is on the Big Easy Cruise is because this band represents a level of American music making that's like the highest level, and that's because they're starting with that. Take the metaphor further, the roux and the gumbo. This band has got about as good as the roux gets.
Well, yeah, and that is one of the defining things of a lot of New Orleans bands is that they have a groove, they have a swing, they have a feel, which you don't get a lot of other places. So the bands that you just mentioned all have that, even though they're not from here. They have that same feel, and that. Yeah, it's really interesting that you were kind of training your whole life, really, to end up in this spot, it seems like.
I had a friend, too, who was studying. He was 5 years older than me. I was 15, and he was studying with Johnny Vidakovich. And I came down.
Great New Orleans drummer, Johnny Vidakovich.
Yeah, he's incredible. And I came down here and met Johnny, and I was just walking on the street today, and I walked past this club I sat in at a bar with him, So I started coming here that long ago, and I always swore I was going to move here, but I always say that, New York City fates are met on good deals on rent. And my drummer in Milwaukee found a rent-controlled apartment in the East Village, and that's 26 years later, I'm still there.
These interesting little small decisions have huge impacts down the road.
Yeah.
Well, so when you got invited to be in Little Feat, was it as simple as the process as Bill described back in the day, just a handshake, hey, you want to? I mean, or was there?
Oh, no.
Or did he have to woo you a little bit more? Like, you got that right.
It's I've had a lot of interesting direction of energy in my life when it comes to getting around, and with these guys, it was no exception. There was a lot of, Bill and I met when I sat in with the Doobie Brothers, although I don't think we ever really had a full conversation because we were on tour with Greg Allman and the Doobies together, but we did get to jam a bit. And my name kind of came up in the hat because Larry Campbell and Teresa Williams were out with these guys subbing for Paul in 2019 when he was ill. Mm-hmm. And, in the music business, all I can say is don't ever miss a gig.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they had 2 gigs they couldn't do, and through a confluence of events, I ended up talking to Bill and getting called to sub for these 2 gigs. And we had a great conversation on the phone, and Bill was, just really, really made me feel good about it, but also made me understand that a lot of people think they can play this music and they can't. And that resonated with me a lot. And I worked hard for a couple weeks. And when I showed up on deck that day, the band had not arrived yet, and I was there. And my friend Jay Collins was playing tenor in the band at the time, and he was really my chief cheerleader to get me to sub on these gigs. And he calls me and he says, the band just found out that Paul's passed away. And that was the first time I ever met Fred, Sam, and Kenny, was to give my condolences for Paul. And then we walked out on stage, and we played a tune for Paul, and it was this whole gig where it was really like that was the moment where you were asking me about Greg Allman. I mean, I remember, helping to carry Greg on stage for his last shows, and stuff. And it just resonated with me about the brotherhood that these guys shared with Paul, and losing him. And I was still losing Greg. I don't think it's ever gonna not be fresh for me.
Sure.
I miss him every day. We really had an amazing run, and I really felt for these cats. And I tried to just play as best I could. And I feel like after the gig, we all kind of looked at each other, and there was still, some loose ends. There always are in rock and roll.
As there should be,
in the
yeah.
background.
As there should be, yeah.
But between the musicians, I felt like we looked at each other and we're like, okay, we can do this like this,
Wow. You were there, yeah.
Thanks, Stevie.
Wow. So just so I'm clear, so you guys played this gig right after getting the news that Paul had passed? I mean, that was.
Yeah, we were leaving the hotel to go to sound check, and our manager at the time, he tells us, on the way to walking to the bus that Paul had passed, and so we got just 10 minutes later, I'm meeting Scott. And he just stepped up to the plate and, played a wonderful show. And we just said, yeah, this is it. You're in the band. No, we don't have to talk about it anymore.
Just like that.
Let's go.
No rehearsal, no audition.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's the way it's always been with Little Feat. I've just never been like an audition notice put in Variety magazine that we're having auditions for guitar players. It's always been somebody in the family. I mean, I was friends with Billy and Lowell for many, many years before. I was going to their gigs and sitting in on the midnight special. I'm in the audience, watching them play all the time. So we were very good buddies when they just asked me to, you come in now because Lowell's gone, so you come in. And then when Paul went, Scott comes in. It's not like people we don't know that come in. Who's the best player going to be? It's just Paul. He threw down so heavily that it was no question. It was like, okay, next gig, let's go.
Well, and doing it that way is so much more organic. I mean, and you already know what you're getting because and correct me if I'm wrong, but maintaining a band is not necessarily about having the best players, but it's having the players that play nice together, that work well with each other, and that are people that you can get along with. So if you're kind of drawing from within the family, as you said, that's a good way to make sure that it's going to work out one way or the other. Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely, yeah.
Let's talk. He's not here for the interview. Talk a little bit about Tony, the newest member of the group. Just came on in 2020. And again, from seeing him the other night, I mean, it seems like a perfect fit. Really drives the band. What did you guys, I guess first, what did you like about Tony, and why does he work so well?
One thing amazing, Anders Osborne has started a gig a long time ago now called Dead Feet, where we played Little Feat songs and Dead songs, and Billy Krusman was playing drums at the time, and Anders and me and Paul and different people. Mm-hmm. So he left the gig, Billy did, and Tony came in, and I played 2 or 3 years with him and got to know him, and I wasn't even aware that Billy knew, Tony, and then so Billy started telling me, I got this drummer that we want to maybe use, and more than likely we want to use, and his name is Tony Leone. I went, I know Tony forever. He's great, So it was, again, somebody that was very close to us and a natural. But what was amazing was Billy calls me and says, Tony wants to sing Skin It Back, And I'm like, I never heard Tony sing. I mean, he's a singing drummer. Okay, Levon Helm's a singing drummer. And okay, whatever. We both said, all right, well, let's see what he does. And then he came in and just amazing singer. He's an amazing singer, and he sings all of Paul's songs, and it's just incredible. It was an amazing surprise for us.
No, he did a great job with it the other night, I thought. Yeah, I was surprised. Because, in fact, I was standing with Russ Broussard, Susan Calsell's husband, who's a drummer, who's playing with various people on the boat. And we're standing there, and he's like, who's singing that? And it's like, it's the drummer. So he had no idea. But sure enough, he does a great job. Yeah.
He learned it from Levon Helm.
Did he really?
Yeah,
What's he talking about,
so I've known Tony for probably like 20 years. I mean, when I first met Tony, he was playing jazz around New York, and then he started this band, Ola Bell. It's a wonderful band. And, yeah, everybody in that band is incredible. Glenn Pasha now plays with Bonnie Raitt. And,
who actually dated my wife.
oh, yeah?
Yes.
That's right. I forgot
I don't
Glenn
know why
lived here.
I needed to share that, but yeah, anyway. Go
I
ahead.
guess Glenn didn't waste his time down here.
No, he lived in New Orleans for a while, and yes. Before we were married, I should add. Before my wife and I were married.
It all ended happily for everyone.
Yes, it did. Everything's
Are
cool.
you sure?
It was 25 years ago, a long time ago. Anyway, go ahead. Continue. Sorry.
Yeah,
I didn't mean
yeah.
to insert myself in that.
Were there any accordions involved?
I
heard he plays a mean accordion, actually.
can only speak from my own experience, and no. So, I play no instruments. There we go. We'll leave it at that.
So yeah, but Tony, man, we've been sending each other messages for 10 years, threatening to start a band together or do something, and he'd be out with Chris Robinson or Phil Lesh, and I'd be out with Greg or my band, and we were flying all over, but we just stayed in touch because you know, Tony is like a great example of, and I suppose I'm somewhat of a product of this, also being 26 years in New York City, but when I first moved to New York City, I knew how to play I thought I knew how to play a lot of styles. And then I had to figure out how to pay for an apartment. And I showed up, the first gig I ever did in New York that paid a lot was a wedding gig, and I walked into the cocktail hour, and they were playing Wayne Shorter and Chick Corea songs.
At a wedding?
Yeah, just to practice.
Oh, okay. I was
You
like,
know,
what bride
so I mean,
requested that?
so
Yeah,
you know,
geez.
and Tony, I think, is a product of that scene also, where it's like you have to go in so many directions. But with Ola Bell, I think, you know, that's such a great group of singer-songwriters, and again, by the way, modeled on not only what the band did, but Little Feat and the Allman Brothers. Everyone in the band is a singer-songwriter, and they made a couple wonderful records, and I really admired what they did in their time together, and that led into Tony playing with Levon, because Amy Helm was one of the singers in the group. And I met Amy through Jay Collins. They used to be married, and I met them when they were in Brooklyn without kids and everything, and I started going up to Rambles and playing. And that's really where Tony and I reconnected. But yeah, I mean, I saw him play with Levon many times, two-drummer thing, and he's on the Live at the Ryman record, the Levon Helm Live at the Ryman. Tony's playing drums on a few songs on that, double drums, and also drums when Levon plays mandolin.
Wow. Okay.
So that's why I get a chill when Tony sings, because I lived in Woodstock for 2 years, and I used to go over there and do sessions, and I got to record with Levon and hang with him, and I subbed in the band for Larry Campbell again. That ended up being Levon's last show, so
wow.
It's kind of interesting.
Wait, you played on Levon's last show?
Yeah, it's subbing for Larry.
Oh my gosh.
So I don't know. Careful hiring either of us.
Yeah, apparently so. Jeez.
Wait a second. I just worked with Larry before coming out here. Oh no.
Well, again, all the threads pull together.
I guess it's just what happened. I didn't do it by design.
Well, the end result is that you guys have a great version of Little Feat right now, and it's a heck of a band, as everyone has seen them. So. Yes, indeed. We are kind of about out of time, but I wanted to see if anyone had any questions before we sign off here. Not surprisingly. Okay, we'll work our way from front to back, so go ahead. And please, no questions about accordions. Okay.
Handcuffs are good.
Or handcuffs. Oh, heck yeah.
Yeah, that was mine. That was my dearest wife, Patricia here, who most of you know. She has bought all of my best instruments. Scott and I just did an interview with Premier Guitar Magazine, or is it a thing?
Yeah, Premier
Yeah.
Guitar. They have a thing called the rig rundown.
Oh, the rig. So we did the rig rundown, and I was telling this gentleman that my wife had gone into the Guitar Center, the big guitar store in Los Angeles, and Jimi Hendrix was still very much alive and hanging out in Los Angeles all the time. Lowell used to go jam with him and come back and tell us like, "Hey, man, he's got playing his guitar through a Leslie and this and that and the other," and she went into the store. I had a good friend of mine who was kind of a mentor named Mike Dacey, who's a studio guitar player, a wonderful guitar player, one of the members of the Wrecking Crew. And he was a Stratocaster dude, and I needed an electric guitar, and I said, I want a Stratocaster. So she went into the guitar store and said, give me a used Stratocaster. And he just reached up on the wall and said, here's one of Jimmy's. He's left here for consignment. And and she brought it home and said, here's one of Jimmy's guitars. And I went, oh, thanks. So the story goes, neither one of us really believed it too much. Yeah, it's one of Jimmy's guitars, great. So James Burton, the wonderful guitarist, and I were on a recording date together, and my guitar was getting kind of beat up. It's like, I got it used, and I used it very heavily myself. And so he says, hey, I know this guy that worked at Fender, and he'll put that guitar like it came off the factory. So I left it with him, and as a joke, when I left, I said, hey, be careful because, that's one of Jimmy's guitars. And he yeah. And he calls me on the phone like a couple hours, or no, it's a couple days later, and says, I just took all the paint off the guitar, and there's like screw holes where the, he would have put a strap on a left-handed to make a right-handed guitar left-handed. And
wow.
And he says, we made 2 black guitars for Jimi Hendrix, and we know what happened to one of them. It went off, but we didn't ever lost track of the other one. And I'm darn sure that this is it. And I went, oh, great. So there's a little Providence guy. And then the real kicker of the story is I'm telling what I'm telling you to my friend Scott. And I'm saying, we know which one happened to one of the guitars, but we don't know what happened to yours is the other guitar. And Scott goes, I've got the other one. And so after all these millions of years apart, we get together and we have the 2 guitars, the 2 black Jimmy Strats.
That is
Wow.
crazy.
And that's an
Wow.
insane coincidence.
Jeez,
Kismet, as it were.
that's incredible. Okay. Okay. Well, he was first. Go ahead. Is a new record a possibility? Is the question.
It's a definite possibility. In order of which will be Sam Clayton. It's called Sam's Place. It's a blues record. We recorded it. Scott suggested we do it in Memphis. We were doing some stuff at sound checks, but Scott, let's make it an event. We did it in Memphis, thanks to Scott's prodding. And the next one will be done, I think, in Nashville. And we've got a lot of songs for it. So, yeah, we love the material we already play. We're going to dig deeper, but there's going to be a lot of new songs, too. And I reckon we have at least 2 to 3 albums easily.
Wow. All right. What's the question? Yes, sir.
Well, that's what Lowell told me. He said that, Lowell had these feet that we used to say they were like space pods because they were as wide as they were long, these little things. And Jimmy Carl Black said, hey, man, you got little feet. And Lowell goes, hey, little feet, that's it. And he says, F-E-A-T, like the Beatles. I went, hey, cool. All names are weird until they get popular, and then they're good, But okay, Little Feet and F-E-A-T, like the Beatles.
Well, and Scott, that ties into what you were saying about the Beatles. The connection, how you prefer these guys, the Beatles, but their name was part of it too. So it was a tribute.
Yeah, you can never, you never lose copying the Beatles. That's for sure.
You never lose. No. Any other questions? Yes.
Thank
All
you
right.
for
So
that.
it's saying when you saw Scott started to play and you were confident that the band was going to be okay going forward. All right. That's a heck of a compliment. There you go.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? Oh, yep. We got a couple more. Oh, go ahead. You and then you. Yeah, and then you.
You're right. The very, 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 very first one, Lowell put an ad in the paper, said, looking for a drummer must be freaky.
All right. Yes, sir. Go ahead. Okay, the question is, yeah, what song was playing on the jukebox when Tony walked in? Tony Soprano walked in on the last episode of The Sopranos, and the first part was what? Was Chico Hamilton? Okay, okay.
Well, Kenny Grandy, who has more relatives than Imelda Marcos has shoes. That's funny. Anyway, I'm a funny guy, you know. I think it was Forrest Hamilton was involved in putting that band, or our band, with Chico Hamilton. Van Dyke also told me a story with Lowell. There was a group called Happy End from Japan, and we wound up playing on their record as well. This is what just, I don't know if we had a bass player at that time or not, but in the United States, the Japanese would come over with not a suitcase, but a briefcase full of money. And purportedly, Lowell opened his suitcase with $100 bills staring at him. He looked at Van Dyke and says, "I think we can make a lot of music with this."
All right, and then the trivia question and answer. Does anybody know what was playing on the jukebox?
This is All That You Dream.
Which one? What was it?
All That You Dream was the Little Feat song that was playing, and they ended with some other song. But it was debatable whether that would end the series or, as it turned out, be before the ending.
Before the ending. All right. All right. Very good. Yes. Not counting cruise ships. Favorite venue?
I don't remember any of them. You need Paul Barrere. Paul Barrere could remember every club. I would say, what club is that? He says, you know, the dressing room's downstairs in this like horrible place, and around the corner with the so and so. And I'm going, oh, okay, yeah. He knew every gig we ever played, but I don't remember any of them. Yeah, one, show me where my amp is.
That's all you really need to know is where the amp is. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Anybody else? All right. Oh, well, one last one.
What happened to Feet Camp?
Feet Camp? What happened
Feet
to Feet
Camp is going to be in Cancun next year. So if you're saying what happened to Jamaica, that's a whole other subject. So is that you want to know what happened to Jamaica or what happened to Feet Camp?
Jamaica.
Jamaica is, well, our ex-manager works there, which is one thing. It gave us pause with maybe going back to work with him. I don't want to blame it on Cameron. Cameron Sears is a delightful person. And Kareem, we like him. But it was time for us to try something. 20 years, it's not the 7-year itch. Let's make a move. So we're going to be in Cancun, and I think everybody's going to really enjoy it down there. I think, what happened last year, we had great music in Key West, but we did not have the camaraderie that we've had on this boat, for example. And something that
Yeah.
all of us spoke to the new management about, which are Vector Management. Brian Penix is a great guy. And said, if we're going to do any of this again, we spent 20 years building this thing up. Let's not destroy it with trying to get too cute about it. We want to get together with people and trade stories, shed some tears, some laughter, which I've done on this boat with a few people. And we cherish you guys as friends, family, and fans. So thank you.
There you go. Well said. Well, for now, yes, enjoy the rest of the Big Easy Cruise. You get a chance to see these guys play some more. Thank you to Bill, Fred,
Thank you, Keith.
Scott. Appreciate it. Guys, have a great cruise.